Welcome to this short video where I'm going to look at getting started with teaching languages and give you some top tips that I've collated together from different teachers and development officers. So I'm going to focus on primary, but they're equally applicable to secondary, and they could be either for teaching L2 or L3. Obviously, this isn't an exhaustive list, so I'm just going to look at some of the top tips to get us started with teaching languages. And that you might be a probationer or a student teacher or somebody who's just new into teaching languages or somebody with more experience that just wants to go over the basics. So hopefully there'll be something for everybody. Okay, I put make it fun as the first thing because I think when learners are enjoying themselves and having fun, they often don't realise they're learning. So if we can combine the idea of having fun whilst learning, I think we almost can kill two birds with one stone. And I think one of the best ways to do this is playing a variety of different games. Now, they could be games inside the classroom, such as a simple game of four corners, or it could be something outside, and it could be in a French lesson or in, for instance, a PE lesson. So using games, and that could be games that are teacher-led, pupil-led, in small groups, whole class. There's a whole plethora of games that you can do. Okay, making sure that we're including everybody so that nobody feels left out. And I think the key here is looking at verbal and non-verbal communication. So when we're introducing vocabulary, if we can introduce it with a mime or an action, for instance, bonjour, then that means a child can use that mime to respond to a question, for instance, if they don't feel comfortable saying the word. And that's a very simple technique of being inclusive of everybody. It could be that the non-verbal communication is something like a tick for yes, for instance. So it doesn't always have to be an action. It could be a visual picture or a sign that they can write on a show me board, for instance. Okay, also appealing to different learning styles. We all learn differently, and there are lots of different ways that we learn. I like just to use a very broad term, VAK, visual, audio, and kinesthetic, because those three different areas encompass most learners. So if you're introducing vocabulary, if you can try and do it visually, for instance, with an image, and say the word, so you've got that audio, and then kinesthetically, so that the children are moving with an action. So if you do that, when you introduce language, when you consolidate it and practice it, then you should be able to include most learners again. We need to think carefully about the pace of learning. And so quite often this might mean in the language classroom moving through a series of short activities, and they might cover a range of skills, and that keeps children interested and it keeps them progressing in their learning and using it across different skills. Predominantly talking and listening at the start and in the lower primary, and then moving that on to reading and writing. And you'll probably find actually that it will be listening that will be the first thing that children do. They'll hear you saying words and then they'll start to speak. And those different activities, again, it could be something like playing a game, then doing a bit of a song, having a story. So, just different activities that engage the learners in different ways. Thinking about how we differentiate the activities to include everybody, because children in the class will all be at different levels and stages in their learning. So it might be that you differentiate by input, how much support you give a child. So if you were giving a question, do you ask an open question? For instance, what's your name? Comment tu t'appelles? There's no support. Or do you give them some support? Comment tu t'appelles? Moi, Je m'appelle Taya. Et toi? So I've given them a model. And you might progress that even more with more support, giving them a choice of 2 options, for instance, to choose from. You might give them support by it being visuals on a wall. If it was written work, it might be a word bank or a dictionary. So the support can be to help learners in a variety of ways, either to help consolidate learning or also to progress it. Now, we can also support by our output what we're expecting of them, whether that be the skill, listening, talking, reading, or writing, or whether it be the expectation. Are we expecting children to respond with a single word? Like if I ask the question, what's your name? Comment tu t'appelles? They could respond with Taya, just their name. Or je m'appelle Taya, a whole phrase. So there's a different expectation that you have of children, and children hopefully will be able to respond in a way that's appropriate to them, and that would almost self-differentiate. As learners progress, they'll become more and more aware of where they're at, and it might be that you need to give work at sort of 2 or 3 different levels, as you would with reading or maths, for instance, or spelling words, so that you're giving children level of work that's appropriate to their learning. Engaging learners, this goes back to having fun. If we can engage them, then they're going to be motivated to learn. And a great way to do this in another language is using songs. And there are lots of really great songs. They might be traditional cultural songs, or they might be catchy tunes that are in English that can then be used in a foreign language, or it might be songs that have been created to learn the foreign language. So there's lots of different songs, and there are a plethora of websites available to support that. And on YouTube, there's lots of different animations that can help give the children an understanding of what the song is about, and also has words for children to sort of sing along karaoke style. So just encouraging them to listen and join in. And obviously embedding the languages, so using languages on a daily basis, that sort of drip feeding approach, little and often. It might be we're using them for daily routines. So once you've taught them some language, like greetings, greeting them in the morning, or if you've taught them colours, maybe using those for table names. So trying to use language that's been taught. And then also trying to bring together different areas of the curriculum. So if you've taught them some numbers, can you do some of your mental maths in French, for instance? If you're doing some topic work, can you look at taking an IDL approach and bringing in the language into that? For instance, with space, if they're looking at different planets, can you practice the colours of the planets? And that revises and recycles the language. We can also think about consolidating learning and progressing it forward. So if we take the example of songs, then we might want to start by teaching them a tune that they might already know and be aware of, such as Frère Jacques, in French, in English first maybe, then French, and then looking at how the children can replace the words with words that they are using and learning. And so you can teach them a song, for instance, using numbers, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so it goes on. And then maybe the children could actually create their own song with the numbers in a different order or with higher numbers. And so they're progressing it and making it their own. We can also progress games. So you might start with a straightforward bingo game that children are used to. And, you might do this in English first. If you're doing it with numbers or colours, and getting them to draw a wee grid on a piece of paper or on a show me board and put in the words that they know, and get them to cross them out, as you call it, or getting them then to do strip bingo, where they fold a piece of paper and they write 4 words. If you've got 4 squares that are folded, and then they hear it and they only have to tear off the numbers or the colours or the words that they hear that are at the end until they're left with nothing. So you can take one game and then you can start to change it and differentiate it and progress it. You can also change it by using sort of English and pictures to begin with, and moving it forward, and then getting the children to write the words in another language, so that they are practicing that skill of writing, or you give it to them with the words written, so they're reading. So the same game could be played with a composite class, for instance, but you could have it slightly differently to vary the skill that children are working on. And that really leads me to that next point here, talking about variations. So once you've got a game, then you can have different variations. Like here we've got this knockout bingo game, where they're given, a certain number of cards, and then they have to put their card down when they hear it. So they're combining different skills. And you'll be, used to doing that already in the classroom, but it's just very easy, simple ways of progressing. Okay, so that's just a few top tips. There's a lot more, but that's enough to get you